Welcome back to another Valley Sports Plug Phoenix Suns recap for November 30th through December 13th, 2022. I'm Chris Patrick. With me, as always, my man, Michael Benjamin, here to break it all down for you. So, Mike, let's get right into it. During the last 2 weeks, the Suns would play 8 games, going 2 of 6 during that stretch. Kind of keeping on that trend of the ups and downs we've been seeing with doing these bi-weekly recaps for you. So let's get into these games, kind of deep dive, see what was going on. We would start this stretch at home against the Chicago Bulls, winning that game 132 to 113. Next, it was at home against Houston, losing a nail-biter 122 to 121. We would bounce back the next night with a huge victory in San Antonio against the Spurs, 133 to 95. And then, Mike, all downhill from there. We would lose in Dallas. We would lose at home against Boston. We would lose twice in New Orleans against the Pelicans, and then lose again to Houston on Tuesday night. So not really what you want to see at this point in the season. Chris Paul came back, but Devin Booker and now DeAndre Ayton are injured and missing from the lineup. So a lot of questions in the rotation and overall. But Mike, I want to pass it over to you now and get your reaction from the last 2 weeks and this abysmal run the Suns are on right now.
It truly is incredible how many things can really happen within a span of 2 weeks. I mean, November 30th feels like ages ago. That was at the tail end of the Suns really capitalizing on some good play from Devin Booker and a huge win over the Chicago Bulls. And it really all started to fall apart from there. I mean, Booker had a clinic, 51 points in that game. And then we come out and blow a 16-point lead to the Houston Rockets at home with a 122 to 121 loss. The Rockets are a young, scrappy team, and they've had some good wins of recent, going back to their win against the Bucks this weekend. And we're going to talk some more about those Houston Rockets, but, you know, good teams. Suns came back and did what you're supposed to do. You go on the road against a rebuilding San Antonio Spurs team, and you just handle business. The Suns have won their last 7 meetings against the Spurs. You know, the Tony Parker, Tim Duncan days are long gone, and they're in a strong rebuild right now. They have some good core pieces like Keldon Johnson. I know me and Chris kind of both like him, keeping an eye on him. I got him on one fantasy team. He has him on the other. But, you know, we were seeing some better things, specifically from Devin Booker. It seemed like he was more streamlining to the basket in that game. And Mikal Bridges exploded from deep in the first half, had 5 threes, and it was a 30-point game before you knew it. And then we find ourselves playing the Dallas Mavericks, and it seemed like the Western Conference semis all over again, where we fell apart really fast and just had no footing to ever get back into that game. I mean, we were down 33 to 15 after the first. Christian Wood was destroying the second line. You know, he had a big game, the first game of the year against us, but our second line bigs just couldn't handle him. They came out in the second quarter almost with like a conceded lineup. We weren't going to fight into this game. You know, Okogie, Landell, and Lee. I've just been wondering what some of these substitution patterns have been, and I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more. But then we started to see a downward trajectory from Devin Booker. I mean, he didn't have his first basket until 4 minutes left in the second quarter. No wonder we're down by 25 points in the blink of an eye. And our outside shooting defense was just horrid. We weren't moving. We weren't seeing guys in corners, and everything was just green lights for them. We come back home hoping we can get some momentum against the Boston Celtics and just get absolutely blasted. Utter disappointment on national television once again. I mean, there's a lot going to happen with the Suns this year since they have so many games on national television. But a possible NBA Finals preview to get manhandled that way is just an absolute tough look. I mean, at one point, Blake Griffin had more threes than the entire Suns team. To start off the game, Torrey Craig is your main offensive weapon, you know, and then we had some weird substitution patterns. And as soon as Malcolm Brogdon came onto the floor, it was such a mismatch. They expanded and they're up by 20 points before you even can blink. I keep saying it. Devin Booker, 2 baskets, 6 minutes left in the second quarter. from your main guy. This is what happens when you don't get the contributions from them and we don't have consistency from our bench or our other main guys. And a big killer was Devin Booker having those 4 fouls with a minute left in the first half. You just have no chance at that point. We were down by 45 points at one point within this game. Just bad. And then quickly, the back-to-back games against the Pelicans, couple of points. Alvarado's a pest. I don't like the guy. The epitome of a guy that if he was on our team, I think I would love him, but don't like him. And Zion is a man amongst boys. He just moves the needle and moves piles. I mean, he was making poor Torrey Craig look like he was a 150-pound kid out there trying to guard him. It was tough. I mean, the first game, it seemed like they kind of laid down in that third quarter and didn't want to fight. But at least when they came back to back, when Devin Booker went out with the hamstring injury and didn't play in that game, they fought till the end and eventually went to overtime. You just didn't have much when both Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton both foul out in that game. And you're kind of stuck with the secondary lineup to try and finish off those last 5 minutes in overtime. It was going to be a tough one. And then the big thing about tonight, before I pass it over to Chris, against the Houston Rockets, one of the saddest displays of basketball as a unit, as a team that I have seen in a while. And that's what happens when you're reeling and you go eventually have a 5-game losing streak and you're searching for answers. We had 11 made shots in the first half. I think I texted the guys at one point in that second quarter, we came down and I swear shot 15 straight 3-pointers, back-to-back-to-back possessions. Everything was short. Nothing was falling. There was no movement. It was just like we were out there playing pickup basketball. The Suns were 13 of 51 from 3, 25%, 32% overall from the field. Mikal Bridges probably had his worst game as a professional, 4 of 24 from the line. He kept throwing it up from outside as well, but when you see your teammates doing the same thing, you just kind of fall into the rhythm. And Houston didn't play even that great in this game. They only shot 42% from the field, 34% from 3, and they had 23 turnovers comparative to our 10. But they killed us on the boards, out-rebounding the Suns by 23 boards. And now we find ourselves in 4th place in the Western Conference, where it's basically a 2-game difference between the 4th and the 10 spot. And if things don't start to turn around quickly, we might find ourselves in a really, really large uphill battle from the bottom, trying to fight back to where we just were 2 weeks ago at the top of the conference. You got the stats to back up what we've been seeing here. I need to know what's gone wrong these past 8 games for this Phoenix Suns squad.
Well, Mike, I can tell you it has not been pretty. You did an amazing job highlighting there kind of the highs and lows and what we saw in this 2-week stretch. And to be honest, not a lot of highs, but I will start us out on a high note, looking at these stats and kind of doing a deep dive. Of course, you mentioned those big games from Devin Booker against Chicago, 51 points on a 20 for 25 shooting night. That's unheard of. 80% shooting. I think he was even getting shout outs from Kevin Durant and other guys around the league, just saying how ridiculous that was. The next game, he would follow it up with another big performance against the Houston Rockets. Unfortunately, that was a loss, but he did have 41 points, 15 of 25 shooting, still 60% shooting, very good, and what you kind of want to see from Devin Booker. But Mike, you said it, man, really started to fall apart after that. In his next 4 games, he was averaging 15.5 points per game, 5.8 assists, 2.3 rebounds, and a horrible 34.9% field goal shooting. So we didn't see him play since that first Pelicans game. Like you mentioned, the next 2 games, he was out with the hamstring. Things didn't really get too much better for the Suns. Of course, as we know, they've lost now 5 straight. I want to talk about DeAndre Ayton. He went out against Houston here this last game. So only 5 points and 3 rebounds in the 15 minutes he clocked in that game. But he wasn't doing that good either. I think he was 2 of 10 at the time he went out. And kind of keeping in the theme of the Suns overall, up and down and inconsistent from DeAndre Ayton. He would have a big game also against the Bulls with 30 points, 14 rebounds, 2 blocks. But then the next game following it up, 8 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 turnovers. So you just never really know what you're going to get from DeAndre Ayton. And some of those other games, 25 points, 10 rebounds, 20 points, 8 rebounds. 8 points, 7 rebounds, 25 points, 14 rebounds. So we know what he's capable of. He's a double-double every night guy, but he's also a single a night guy at the same time. And you just can't have that from a guy getting paid max money. And you'll continue to hear me say that. And Michael Benjamin will tell you the same thing. He has to play like a max money player. Some of the other guys on the roster, of course, we got to see Chris Paul come back as we're losing these other pieces. He returned against Boston on the 7th and was really feeling the fours in that game. He had 4 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and 4 turnovers. So that's 4 stats for you, all getting 4 in each. We lost that game, of course. Big game in the loss against the Pelicans, 24 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, and 1 fight with Jose Alvarado. We will talk, I'm sure, if you tune into the Heat Check podcast, the unwritten rule of Zion dunking in the final closing seconds of that game. And that's kind of what sparked that little fight there. But more to Chris Paul, man, he's back. He's kind of still trying to figure out what player he wants to be, it seems like. In the second game against the Pelicans, he had 6 points and 11 assists. So a very different game than the previous night. And I know Devin Booker wasn't playing, so maybe a different role, but just my commentary there is I would have expected him to try and maybe take more of a scoring role in that game and not defer so much to other guys. But I think overall this team kind of has an identity problem. They need to figure out the rotations, as Michael Benjamin was saying. It doesn't seem to make sense. It almost seems lazy and lackadaisical at times, where we're not getting out on shooters, not playing urgent defense. And I even saw Mikal Bridges overextending. Mikal Bridges during this 8-game stretch, 15.4 points per game, 4.3 rebounds, 2.4 assists, and 1 steal per game during that stretch. It's got me worked up, Mike. It's got me worked up. These Suns, they're not doing too good. And the last player I wanted to highlight in this 8-game stretch is the $40 million man himself, Landry Shamet, who during his 17.4 minutes a game encouraged up a mighty 8 points per game, 1.4 rebounds per game, 2 assists, and I'll throw him a bone. He did get 1 steal per game, really playing that tough defense out there. So with all that being said, I'm pretty low right now, which means that the next 2 weeks should go pretty good if the trends carry on as they have. So still room for optimism, I think, but hammering away on my keyboard here because I had some thoughts and things I was thinking about today that I wanted to share with everyone in this recap. And reflecting on the recap from 2 weeks ago when we announced that James Jones had the promotion to president of basketball operations, as well as his GM role. And I did say that was well deserved, and I still stand by that. I think that the way James Jones has transformed this organization into a contender, it's been incredible and a fun ride. And I know there's still room for improvement. And as fans, that's our job, is to be picky and always want the best from our team. But I do want to point out some of the pushback that I got on that praise I was giving him. And I think it's mostly targeted at this season, the off season, and maybe how last season ended. Obviously the blunder with losing to the Mavericks, I won't attribute that to James Jones, but then, like I mentioned, the $40 million man there, Landry Shamet, we signed him to a 4-year, $40 million deal. So he's earning $10 million every season, a little bit, plus or minus. I think it was like 42 million. Either way, in this last offseason, only getting Damian Lee and maybe spending too much time chasing Kevin Durant, where also at the same time we were flubbing through the DeAndre Ayton situation, not really knowing what we were going to do with him. I think we can sit here and say, oh, they were always going to re-sign him. Did it really have to go down the way it did, where he signs an offer sheet with the Pacers and where we just match him and keep him? It's odd stuff. And I do think some of that criticism is warranted. But like I said, I still have faith in James Jones because he is far and away a better GM than Ryan McDonough ever was or could be. And maybe the people that are criticizing him don't remember the Eric Bledsoe days and just how bad that time period was. But my last thing I'm going to say is I am still optimistic, and I'm not selling on the Suns yet. We're obviously going to be a playoff team. We just got to figure it out. We got to move Jay Crowder and get the rotation, in order and flowing to make this a well-oiled machine.
The only thing is, these next 2 weeks are going to be tough, man. We lost DeAndre Ayton to another ankle injury today, and Cam Payne, and Devin Booker's out with the hamstring. He's had that kind of a situation multiple times in his career, and they're not going to rush him back. Same with DeAndre Ayton. And if we're going to take the sample size of what we had today from guys like Damian Lee and Jock Landale and Torrey Craig not stepping up, Mikal Bridges having his worst offensive game of his career. The only bright spot tonight was Josh Okogie. He was hustling on both ends of the floor, but everything is so inconsistent with this team. And now even bringing back Chris Paul, it's all just question marks, because how much time can you really play Chris Paul? How much time is it till probably another eventual injury with Chris Paul? You cross your fingers, but the guy's 38 years old, and he's had a history just with his time being with the Phoenix Suns. And you can't always just blame everything on injuries. I mean, bless your heart, I wish we could do it for the Cardinals, but there's a foundational situation that you have to find with the guys that you have in that locker room and find a way to put it together to get some wins and get out of this funk. And December 15th, I know a lot of people have that date circled on their calendars because a lot more players are trade eligible from their extensions that they've signed and whatnot. But it's not just going to be a little piece here or there for this team. I mean, Devin Booker needs another bona fide scorer with him. You know, some of the rumors that we've seen in the past week with Eric Gordon or Kenyon Martin from the Houston Rockets for Jay Crowder, like, dude, I don't want those guys. Like, I don't want them. They're not going to do anything for us. There's just a lot more foundational things that have to come back together. And this is the bipolar recap, baby. I mean, last week we were smelling roses, and this week we're just trying to shovel the crap so we don't drown in it.
Yep. It's been tough sledding, and we'll have to see what the next 2 weeks hold. Some games I'm looking forward to is that last matchup against the Pelicans for the season on December 17th. Guys, it isn't getting any easier. The Lakers are hot right now, as hot as they can be. We got to play the Grizzlies twice, and on Christmas Day, we'll play the Denver Nuggets. So make sure you tune in 2 weeks from now to get all the latest on the Phoenix Suns, and we will catch you next time. So for Michael Benjamin, I'm Chris Patrick. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.